Hey, Carter.
Hey, Taylor.
You ready to do our podcast, Setting Up for Adventure, a world-building odyssey of the imagination?
Oh, yeah, the one where we talk about role playing games and the campaigns we love to run and resources for world building.
Yeah, that one.
Hey, let's do it.
Since last time we talked, I have run 2 sessions of Witch Quest. I've read about Starfinder, Stars Without Number, Ryutama, and the Digimon Adventure System role-playing game, and my head is full of ideas.
All right, since last we left, I have run 0 adventures, and I think I read 2 pages of the first D&D 5th edition published campaign adventure book. So I think you'll be telling me a lot about its stuff this time.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. And then we also both experienced a rare celestial phenomenon.
That's right, we did.
Completely separately, we both went down to Oregon to see our sun get swallowed by the moon.
Now, I can see entire religions forming around like what we saw down there. Just like if you had no context and no idea that it was coming, and you were in the right place at the exact right moment, and you looked up and saw that, I could not imagine what you'd think if you had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, I could see entire mythologies coming out of that, especially because all of the other events that happen around it, like birds and everything getting super quiet, and then did you see all those crescent shaped little shadows
Right.
all over the ground?
I saw a bunch of pictures of them. I was in a giant field and didn't see a single one.
That's right.
Of those crescents.
Well, they sure were neat.
I bet. Yeah, no, I think like an eclipse in any fantasy setting is just so very like starter pistol for like events, and everything's based around, you have giant cults and things based off of it, and events based around. I mean, every ritual, every like dark ritual is always taking place on like some sort of eclipse or lunar kind of conflux when planets align and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And then even how it's been used in modern fiction, like I'm thinking of Avatar, Last Airbender, where you have the sun being so related to the firebenders, and so the eclipse, they literally lose their power. Sorry for spoilers for a 10, 15-year-old show.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
Have you never seen Last Airbender?
I've never seen Last Airbender. No, never bothered.
I own all 3 seasons on DVD. I please hope that you bother at some point. They're very good.
Yeah, I heard that like the one that you gotta watch is the live action one.
Yeah.
The M. Night Shyamalan one.
Yeah, it really sets the bar for cinematic. I can't do it. It was so bad. It was so bad that when I saw a clip from it sometime later, I literally didn't remember that scene happening because my brain was deleting those memories. It just wanted nothing to do with it. And I was like reading about it. It's like, wow, that was.
In that case, maybe I have seen it.
It's possible. Maybe we've all seen it, and
everyone has seen it.
Yeah, that's like the calibration of our memories. It just tells our brain, like, this is the pit, this is the low. Just go. This is the benchmark for suppressing memories.
And wouldn't that just be an M. Night Shyamalan twist if it turned out everybody had seen the movie already and they just all forgot? Like, wow,
yeah,
Shyamalan. Hey, I'm Shyamalan.
And it just got like a theatrical re-release at that date.
I mean, if anyone's going to develop the tech to wipe our memories after we watch a movie, so we'll see the movie again, and the twist is we've already seen the movie, it's Marshall Night Shyamalan. I don't know his first name.
Yeah, it's There's a percentage of a chance that it could be Marshall. I mean, it's probably not Marshall, but I think there's nothing stopping us from saying right now that it could be.
It could be Marshall.
Marshall.
It's probably Marshall.
Is it Magical Night Shyamalan?
It's probably.
Witch Quest.
Witch Quest.
Yeah. So,
tell me about it.
Witch Quest was originally released in 1990 or 91. It's a little bit unclear. It was originally released by the Japanese publisher Adventure Planning Services. Is the company name?
That sounds like that sounds like a caterer,
right? Yeah, like we'll go ahead and schedule your adventure. Would you like a dungeon crawl this evening, or are we looking for something a little bit more exotic?
Isn't that the name of like the company from The Game with Michael Douglas and Sean Penn?
Oh yeah, I have.
It's like it's something really close to that, isn't it?
I think so. We can refer to that later. That was a good movie, though.
I love that movie. That's one of my favorite like little movies to have. Is like he gets home and there's a freaking clown sitting on the chair. You're like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, and then it just gets like
awesome movie.
Super real, and you don't know what's the game and what's no longer the game.
It is, yeah, and it's sort of a modern Christmas Carol like tale. It's very wholesome.
Yeah, I thought so. It's about family.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
You're getting Scrooge to open his eyes and see the world for the glory that it is.
Yeah, I know. I do remember it specifically being very uplifting.
Although there was that moment at the end where like they get him to shoot his own brother, and that's gotta be like something, even though it's all fake, like.
No, that's something that sits with you for the rest of your life.
You're like, God, I know it was all fake, but I like remember, I have now a memory that's not manufactured really, of like shooting my own brother.
Yeah, with all the emotions. Experience in that. Yeah, no, that would traumatize somebody for the rest of their lives. That's like...
Yeah, that doesn't go away.
Yeah. But games are fun.
The games are fun. Yeah. The whole thing is fun. Anyway.
And it really is about family in the end. My heart was warmed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's very heartwarming.
Like blood from a bullet wound. So... Witch Quest, Adventure Planning Services. It's heavily inspired by... like Kiki's Delivery Service. It name drops that. I feel like it's also pretty similar to Kino's Journey and other sort of adventure-y kind of magical realism anime of that era. It's in the genre of like pastoral games that are, I think, catching on a little bit more on the internet now with games like Ryutama, which I also read, and I'm going to be playing in a game tomorrow that I'm really excited about.
Are you DMing or are you actually getting to play?
I'm getting to play.
No way.
Yeah.
That rocks.
Yeah. I don't remember. No, I am playing in a Mouse Guard campaign. We just meet so rarely.
I gotcha.
Yeah. But yes.
Yeah, I'm playing in exactly one campaign and it's yours.
Right. We are in a campaign, aren't we?
We are.
A moment of silence, please. So
one day we'll get back to it.
We're busy folk. That's why we're doing this podcast.
That's true.
So it's a game where the players play in pairs, where one character will play a witch and the other character plays that witch's partner cat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the way that the mechanics work is it balances like super simple D6 dice rolling, easy goal meet type of thing. It's actually kind of neat. You roll pairs of D6s a number of times equal to your skill, and if one of those pairs comes up as a match, you succeed.
Okay.
So it's deceptively low probability, but the neat thing is
that's true.
Cats can help the witches by giving them extra dice in their pool. And it has this experience share thing where at the beginning of a session, you give a set amount of points to a partner pair. And every time the cat helps the witch, those are points that go to the cat. They're cat points that go in the cat bank. And that's experience that the cat gets that the witch does not get. So there's like mechanics to try to convince your witch to accept your help or try to convince your cat to like not help you or help you if the situation needs it. So there's some simple dice rolling mechanics, but it also has its own custom tarot deck that you use from everything from plot generation to
Okay.
fortune telling within the game to every day of the month your magic is at a different level, your magic scale, because
Oh.
you have magic. It the difficulty of your magic is based on how powerful your magic is that day, how difficult the spell you're doing is, and how much your target believes in magic. So the scenario for me that kept coming up is the witches had to transport a large amount of cheese from the marketplace to a location of an event that needed catering, and they needed the cheese there at the event. So it kept being like, all right, I gotta see how much this cheese believes in magic. And there are rules for it. It's 1d6 plus 6, because the crafter of the cheese believed in magic and imbued.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
if it's an inanimate object, or if it's an object that doesn't have like a conscious mind, then you go with its maker.
Pretty much, but there's stuff like if it's a toy or like something a child plays with that's imaginative, it's more likely to have a higher one than like modern day tools.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's this really cool game that it's very personal, and it's about kind of like problem solving and working jobs and helping people.
So how many people do you play with?
So the first time I just played it with 2 players. They each played witches, and as the GM, I controlled their cats because cats have way simpler mechanics. And it worked. It's going to feel a little bit more like Monsters and Other Childish Things, which kind of has like everybody plays as children, and the players and GM share control of their imaginary friends who are very real monsters.
Right.
But the second time I ran it for a group of 3. So 2 players were a witch cat partnership, and it was really cool seeing that because the player cat was able to do a whole lot more than I did with the cats. And then I just GM controlled the third player's cat. So ideally, I would want to run it with 4 people. So you could have the...
So you have two witches, 2 familiars. Can familiars be other things aside from cats, or is that just very like set in its... Like, I mean, would it be... I don't know if the rules have rules for it, but could you just copy the mechanics and be whatever familiar you want?
So you would definitely have to house rule it. It's made with the intention of cats, like from the theme of the tarot deck to... so the way that magic works is witches can do literally any magic you can think of. You just kind of like set your difficulty based off of a list of suggested spells. And they have the calibrating difficulties of if you're trying to create a world or create an entire universe, you know approximately how difficult it is. And that's virtually impossible, as you would expect. But for cat magic, they have a list of spells those are the spells that they can do. You don't have to roll for them, you just do them, but they cost points. So if you were to play with a different sort of animal for a familiar, you'd want to generate a new list of spells for them, because the cat magic ones are very tied into cats.
Gotcha. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just was curious. So how would you design the adventure? How, like, is it about them? Is it about the world? Where are they? What are they? When you built the quest that you built, like, were you thinking about like how to fulfill them or fulfill like the needs of a town or a like a city?
So I went at it kind of job first, right? Designing like this is the task that they're going to have to complete for the session, and how they choose to do it's going to be up to them. The way that it recommends setting up adventures is drawing 3 cards from the tarot deck, and building the story around that. So for the first setting, I drew the cards Princess, Gem, and Nightmare. So I set up the backstory of there is a princess who is having nightmares, so the king took those nightmares and sealed them away in the gem. But what they found out was that Nightmare Stone, the gem, was actually the powers of the witch, the princess's mother, who was a witch, and the princess was slowly awakening to her magical powers. So the king who like feared the witch and was ultimately the bad guy, sealed away not only the mother's powers but also the daughter's powers, to keep her from being a witch. So the party had to find this gem and bring it back to this tower so the mother's power and the princess's power could be restored. So that was a little bit more involved, I think, and it's still a little bit bigger scale than some of the default or recommended settings necessarily go. But like, I'm also coming from the high fantasy, like the world depends on you type of stories. So
Right.
writing those stories, I'm constantly trying to pull back, where like, okay, so if they don't do this, the world ends. Like, no. No, they just have to do it because it's a job that ends up being a little bit more intense than they bargained for. But like, they ended up relying on their elder witch, who was somebody more powerful than them that was able to help them out, but they still did important roles to support her. And there were a number of things where they helped on a very personal level. And so when they freed the witch went to go take care of the king, right? So there's no like final boss battle or anything like that. It was very much they were solving the problems, and now they get to like experience this world of what happens now that the queen is back and the king is kind of ousted as a bad guy. So they got to be a part of that, but it's not on them to do like the final witch battle.
Gotcha. Nice. That sounds awesome. So is it over? Is there more to play?
So it's designed to be kind of episodic, right? Where you're kind of given different tasks and missions, and each one, it's like your witch elder's like, okay, so you need to help this kid find his lost dog, or you need to help deliver this cheese, because they're given just work, right? Just jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that quest, that mission was complete. It was designed just to be a one shot, but the players both really enjoyed the session. I super enjoy the session. So we're probably going to do a follow up at some point. And that's the kind of cool thing about those episodic games, where you can play it, and then if you don't get around to playing it again, you've still had that complete story. But if you do, you can pick up where you left off.
No, and that's a really nice way to design games that have or like experimental games or games you're not really too familiar with, have like a good adventure that seals itself, and then if it turned out to be fun, you can just keep going.
Yeah, and I think character-wise, there's having the open-ended magic system like that, there's a lot that the players can accomplish right out of the gate, especially without the high stakes. And so that makes it a little bit more accessible than, like, I wouldn't necessarily want to do that with a D&D campaign, because there's so much that goes into character creation. And even if you go with like a template character, if you want a good functional character, you're going to have to start at a higher level, and do all of that. So it becomes a little bit more time commitment. And I think you can still do episodic D&D campaigns. But like, for example, that's a system that lends itself to those ongoing campaigns. Like where Witch Quest could be ongoing, and there is character advancement, but that might feel a little bit stifling after a while. You're definitely going to get the excitement of an ongoing campaign from going to different towns. Oh, that was the other thing. Each town in the world is its own little pocket. So witches go live in their own time scale or their own timeline. And so you might go to one town that's, constantly winter, right? Where then you immediately go to the next town. And it's like harvest season, and another town's having a summer festival. So yeah, each town is its own little microcosm of timeline, of history, of culture, of like government and everything like that. So I think that's where you're going to get the variability in there.
Yeah, that almost it reminds me of kind of the role that Gandalf plays in The Lord of the Rings, where he's just sort of this kind of timeless wandering wizard who, like, if he dies, he just sort of comes back to fill another need. Like, that's his and so he's sort of, I mean, in Lord of the Rings, he doesn't exist outside of time, but he's only in Middle Earth for a certain period, and he's there to serve a purpose, and be sort of like the guiding mentor and sort of symbol of good, which I think is kind of it kind of sounds similar, and I think it'd be I think if I was gonna run kind of a campaign where I wanted my players to sort of fill that role, this sounds like a really good template for it. Being able to kind of, because that's you kind of like look at Gandalf's use of magic, and it's like he kind of does whatever he wants, just rarely.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. And I think that'd be a really cool status to have. I mean, he doesn't have a familiar, although he does have a really dope horse.
Yeah, he is the Lord of Horses.
Yep, he's got the horse.
Yeah.
And also the eagle. The Lord of Eagles is also his best friend.
So yeah, he doesn't mess around when it comes to familiars. He just goes to, and he's like, okay, I kind of want an eagle. I'm going to get best eagle.
Right, and everybody kind of knows who he is, and he's like there. And I think that'd be a really cool thing. And maybe if I was gonna do an adventure like that, my characters, my kind of wizardly, which characters would be charged with like the protection of somebody or something a lot more vulnerable than they are.
Yeah.
And so they would protect them on their the kind of adventure would be about like the NPC, and then these guys would be the guiding hands to it, who are like kind of constantly tempted to might be tempted to do other things or be called away to other things.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting part of, running the campaign like that, because you're almost asking the players to, well, you pretty much are asking the players to take a supporting role, and like they are the main characters in a supporting role, but you get this other character, like, no, they're having the epic quest, they're gonna have to fight the final boss, you just have to make sure that it happens.
Right, you're the sort of steward to the world, and while the real heroes of it, like the real main spotlights, are on other things. Because I mean, in your campaign, you could probably argue that the princess is sort of like the heroine.
Yeah, she would be the protagonist if this was like a storybook.
Right.
I think that is kind of a neat way to look at it. And for like Witch Quest, or like even for like D&D, there's a sense of like you have to be the one that fights it. But like also what you were saying, like there's this need to like have to pull away from time to time, where it's like, okay, I really want to make sure this guy makes it to his final destination, but right now he's just kind of going through this big open field, so I'm going to duck over, take care of this evil that's crawling up from something totally unrelated, jog over here, take care of this real quick, and then you get back and like, what do you mean he was captured by orcs? I left him for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like when you make characters that are so powerful, the conflict has to be like how you kind of I think you kind of have to multiply the amount of conflicts there are, and the weakness, and like the conflict is not like, can I do this, but which thing can I do? Like, right. What do I have time for? And I know that there's going to be consequences if I ignore this problem to go solve this other problem.
Right. The neat thing about the magic system, which I appreciate, is it's a very utility-centric magic system. Now, the game does have a combat chapter. It's approximately 1 page, and it starts with a paragraph of, you don't have to do combat in your game if you don't want to. You may note that the 2 example stories that we include do not have combat. So like a lot of the magic that they recommend is very, very utility, where I think some other games you see magic as this is how you use it in combat, and it kind of forces you to think of other ways that it could be utility. And in our game, JD used Ray of Frost to freeze the gears of a machine that they had to crawl through. So like you still get that utility, but when you're looking at high powered characters, that it's not a question of whether they can do it, but which thing should they do. If you have utility tools instead of like just this does X damage, but this does Y damage over X area, right? You get a little bit, your toolbox is a little bit more fitting for that kind of game.
Yeah, no, I really like the idea of Witch Quest. I would love to be able to run something like that. Do you want to go with? Do you want to talk about another system, or do you want to talk about something from your own head that you want to build out?
Oh wow. So I think Witch Quest is neat because there's a lot of versatility in the character action, but as a system, it presents you with a real basic story and a real basic, setting that is cool. Like there's 4 eras of history. There's the era where witches were, like nature guides and magic guides for humans. Then there's the era where they're like, we're going to rule humans because we're more powerful. Then there's the era where humans were like, you're dangerous and evil, we're going to subjugate you. And then there's this modern era where like we're past the warring thing and we found equilibrium. But what that kind of creates is you don't get as world buildy. You're kind of, it's so easy to work within that system and invent towns because it doesn't have like a definitive list of towns. So you get to invent towns, you get to invent characters, and you get to invent stories, but it's still within the setting of Witch Quest. And so you were talking about reading D&D adventure guides. Do you kind of want to talk about creating smaller stories, smaller settings within games that have pre-existing systems? Like, for example, D&D, carving out your own world, carving out your own settings in something that's so lore heavy, so kind of has a well-defined story already that, like...
Sure.
Yeah, because, like, in D&D, I know you're doing, in your campaign, a lot of different stuff with, like, gods and avatars, and I know when I went to, for the one that I'm running for you guys, swap out the gods of the setting with the gods that you played, there's very much like, okay, so I can't just swap this out one for one because this god also directly relates to the entire culture of the orcs. So it had such an ingrained system that when you go to kind of homebrew it, you realize there's so much interconnectivity, which is wonderful for a setting, but for somebody who likes to tinker and break things, it can be challenging. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm reading this adventure book, and it's called The Hoard of the Dragon Queen. It's the very first 5th edition one, and what I find sort of interesting about it is kind of it sort of has that kind of sheepish sentence at the end of kind of every chapter where it's like, but if your players kind of don't want to do it, you can just do whatever you want. And it's kind of got that tone, where it's like, if your players decide to just skip the village attack, then you can just skip to chapter 2. That's fine. We don't care.
Right.
And you're like, well, come on, man. Like, I think there's something to be said for. I think there's a certain amount of fulfillment when you're actually succeeding at an adventure that's been published that your DM is running. There's sort of a feeling that you get from that is different from if it's a completely homebrewed campaign.
Right.
And I guess it's more the sense of like beating a video game or like beating a choose your own adventure, because everything is there for you. There's no gray area. This is your adventure. This is what you're doing. And I think if I was going to run this adventure, I would keep as close to the book as I could, because that was sort of the promise I was making to my players. Like, hey, we're going to play Hoard of the Dragon Queen, so let's play Hoard of the Dragon Queen. And if they ever did anything that was kind of outside of the scope of the adventure, like we want to visit the neighboring town instead of going to the dragon hatchery right away, well, then I'd be like, okay, let me get the map from the beginning of the book and tell you what's nearby. And then at that point, I kind of have to improvise. But I don't think I would take the time to build out what I would expect, like if they got derailed.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it'd be one of those things where they go to the neighboring town and every NPC's like, sure, I have the shopkeep here, but did you hear about the dragon hatchery in the town down the road?
Yeah. Like, I've heard the dragon hatchery has quite a few treasures, and actually, I think I have a map to it.
Yeah,
somewhere around here, and then that'll be actually I'll pay you to take it. Would you go and find out about it? I wouldn't expect a player to derail that heavily, I guess, from the adventure, and that's and if they did, I mean, go, like, that's fine. I think there's sort of I think every player is also feeling like there is a way to have a satisfaction in this game, and that satisfaction is not going to come from just floundering around other things and not like advancing the story, because you can throw as many random encounters at it as you want. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's like they're not going to advance any amount of plot. unless I was going to make up some sort of murder mystery for them in the next town over.
Right.
Which is like, that's something that we could do. But I think that's something that you kind of have to agree with your players beforehand, because you don't want to have that tug of war.
Yeah.
Between, and I mean, you should always be saying like, yes, you can do this, or you have to roll for it. But, I don't think that a player would willingly derail a DM. Not so, I mean, people will do it if they because everyone has like that one character in their group who kind of is the person who goes against the grain and tries to find a way to be silly and like that. But it's never, I don't think it's ever with the intention of like, I want to derail your story. It's just like, I just want to derail this specific situation.
Yeah. Well, and there's always like constructive versus destructive ways of doing that. Like, I've definitely seen players look for weird, offbeat, creative solutions. And, you know, in some ways, one of the things that I love is when players guess something. They make one of like, oh, is this what happened? And in the back of my head, I'm like, no, but I like that better. All right.
Yeah. You're like, oh shit, what can I change to make it so that is what happened? Like, what have I already introduced and that's like already concrete, but what can I like tinker with down the line so that they turn out to be right about this?
Yeah.
Even though that wasn't my intention. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think there should always be extra solutions to it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so but with the more broad sense of the 5th edition, it's like the campaign I'm running is pretty much it. I didn't pick a overworld like the Sword Coast or Eberron mm-hmm. or Forgotten Realms. It was just sort of like, here's a town that you've been all called to, and we can build the world out as we go. Eventually we established that there's like the Bardic College of Lore is like only kind of a day's ride away because one of them wanted to go level up. And you choose a Bardic school at level 2 or 3, and he wanted to like role play actually going to the school and enrolling, which turned out to be really fun, and we did it over just Facebook Messenger chat.
Right. Yeah, and that's really cool. I think it's I'm gonna throw in here real quick future setting to talk about. I would absolutely love to do an all bard session where like they're like a traveling band and they're just going around performing, just running into like wacky situations, almost Scooby-Doo style.
The thing about that was I would just not want to do it with 5th edition or really with the Dungeons and Dragons system at all. Because the idea that everybody's bards is awesome, but the 5th edition is so constricting, I think, to bards that like it's never, there's always like the idea that someone will try to make a couple rhyming lines whenever they cast a spell, and everybody kind of has to role play the bard in the same way.
That's kind of disappointing.
With 5th edition, that's just kind of, I think that's kind of how it seems, mm-hmm. where it's like you have all these abilities which are only to enhance generally like your team or to cast like an attack spell. It's like what I would kind of want is everybody to be sort of like Kubo from Kubo and the Two Strings, right. Where they are there to not necessarily fight, but to inspire other people to solve their own problems. And they're there to tell stories and entertain. And if they could do that, then they're doing really well. And they can kind of conjure, the bards are this sort of, like there's musicians, but then there's bards. And bards are like this upper caste who have like this magic that they can tap into, but they only use it for entertainment.
Yeah, I dig that. I guess a couple of divergent thoughts. So you'd kind of like want a system like that, because that was my fear with D&D, was that the class system is if everybody's the same class, there's just not enough diversity in, you know, functionality to really make it feel like you need even like 3 characters there, even with different races.
And I think you could definitely homebrew a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think you would have to go really into like, okay, you're a Dragonborn bard. What is Dragonborn music like? Mm-hmm. How is it played? What is the system for like becoming a bard within Dragonborn cultures? Or maybe you were a transplant and you grew up in like a gnomish culture, but you were a dragonborn, and then they found out that you have kind of the bardic magic in you, and then the gnomes kind of trained you, a dragonborn, in their kind of what they do. Like every race or every city or every faction has their own way of training bards, and then that way all your players can come from a really diverse background. But I think there'd be a lot of building to give the players those options for player creation, and it would be really fun to build it with them. But I think it's definitely necessary.
Yeah, you'd need a lot of that cultural background. And maybe it's just like a little bit of consideration into, abilities. And if you go into it knowing that all 4 characters are the same class, maybe look into what some of the other classes can do and kind of tweak and steal to give them like bard abilities. Because I know when I played Exalted, I played a bard-like character because I thought it was super cool that, they had these magical musical abilities. But I found out very quickly, literally the first scene of the first session, which was a combat scene, the first hit of it. So, like, my character came out playing his shamisen of haunting music and stuff. I literally got split in half by a sword and died.
That's upsetting.
Roll 1 of the game was me, like, I play my shamisen to start, like, wigging them out and setting the creepy mood, because he's kind of like this dark and spooky. It's kind of like Murdoch from the Gorillaz meets Jack Skellington, maybe. So the first roll was me doing that. The second roll was me getting split in half. Right? And so the GM said, like, okay, so you don't actually die here. Go ahead and revise your character and make sure that doesn't happen again.
That's fair.
So, yeah, and it was nice. But then I had to go back and say, like, okay, so my character has to wear, like, super cool armor, and he has to have all of these different things. But it was definitely a system not built for bards. And it was definitely something with, like, I would never go to Exalted to have a system of a traveling band of musicians because there's no support for it there.
Right.
There's support for cutting people in half.
Yeah, I'm looking at the player's handbook, and I'm looking at the way the bards can develop, and you can essentially choose 2 paths. You can be part of the College of Lore, where you sing songs about history, like you call upon folk tales and folk songs and probably sea shanties and stuff like that, where you use the stories of the past to inspire, the present. Mm-hmm. Then there's the College of Valor, where you inspire, you sing about what's kind of happening at the moment. You travel to witness events firsthand and then try to keep the memories within the world. So like so basically one is a historian. Well, they're both really kind of historians, but one is sort of like I'll tell the tales of the past, and one is like I'm going to chronicle the tales of today.
Yeah, so
but that's still 2 options, and they're not very, like, you only get 2 extra things per one. So
is it
like?
I was gonna say, is it cheating to eventually let them multi-class?
I don't think so. I just think that
like if the drummer goes barbarian for their
right
their 4th level.
Well, I don't think. Yeah, it's like D&D is built around part social, but like half social interaction, half combat, and like a little bit of skill, or really it's like skill checks, combat checks, and then a 25% I think social interaction, unless you really push to have it, or your players are more prone to that. I think having a bardic game would be really awesome. I just think you just couldn't. I don't think you could use 5th edition either. I want to see that rule book where you can do it. Because
Carter, I don't want to have to make this game.
No, this is such a good idea.
Oh, but I don't want to have to design an RPG system for bards. That's what I want to do now.
No, that's what the point of this is we're gonna make it. We're gonna pitch it now.
Yeah, and if somebody else out there knows of a system or feels inspired to make this system, Lord knows I don't need to put another project on either my plate or Carter's plate. I would love to see that, and I would run the heck out of that game.
So here's what I would do. Bard is not a class in this game. Bard is just what you are. And then the classes are based on like the instrument you play and the background you come from. Like, were you a royal court minstrel, or were you a tavern singer, or were you did you grow up on a boat singing sea shanties, and for like one day you just sort of like sang a tune about it, and like maybe you sang it in a different way, and then all of a sudden like the like visions of the story that was being like woven started appearing and entertained and bring up the morale of the crew that was rowing, and or something like that, and that was your sort of call to action. And there's this sort of magical bardic kind of energy that works itself through the air, and people with the bardic touch can tap into it and bring their music to life and really enhance the entertainment value of it.
You know, just wake them up inside.
Yeah, so like bards are prestigious positions, and like every, if you have an army, you definitely have a bard or two, because you know they're going to be able to turn the tide as they weave their magic to enhance everyone around them.
Yeah, and know what's kind of cool about that idea is that ties back into our Sentinel wizards just sort of wandering the land supporting other people.
Yeah,
I think it would be interesting too, because it almost kind of invites like the genre idea of like how you could explore different genres, and that's almost like determining the mood of the game, because if these bards are all working together, ideally they're all performing the same genre of music, because you don't really want a band with like a folk singer, a heavy metal guitarist, and a classical pianist. Or maybe you do. That could be really cool. But like if you say like, okay, you guys are a heavy metal band, this is going to be an intense session of fighting demons and just waging war on battlefields and your battle bards,
right?
Versus something where like, okay, yeah, your folk is more of a folky type of thing, and you're traveling from town to town, just sort of helping small scale things along. Yeah, I think that could be really cool. And then having those different backgrounds where, yeah, maybe somebody is a trained musician, a noble minstrel, but it took them a long time to discover their bardic power because they had been so focused in just the technical practice of playing an instrument, versus somebody who's a little bit more druidic, where like they had been singing songs to nature and animals for their entire life. But there's like, this is the song of nature. This is how you talk to nature. I'm not singing. This isn't music. This is how I commune with the natural world. I don't get it. So from that direction, it's like
absolutely.
They had the magic imbued in them, but they kind of needed to be like, and this is how you use it to perform an awesome concert. And they're like, oh, okay, I guess I can do that.
Right, and I think there'd be so much room for imaginative players who could, like, they wouldn't necessarily have to sing, like, and that's I think there's room for that. But I'm thinking about like the way I would play it. I wouldn't try to like think of verses. I would try to think of imagery that I could express, and like what sort of conjurations could come from the music I'm making, and describe that as my character plays.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that there are other characters who would very much like to use lyrics to talk about to express their abilities. And I think that would be, you could get class divisions based on that. And I think you would have to make a whole system for checks to make. I think you kind of just have to build that from the ground up. I mean, it's not so heavily inspired in 5th edition, when it's just like, yeah, I make a strum that does thunder damage. I just do a power chord, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I just roll against their armor. Cool. That's awesome. Like, I love the imagery of it, but it's only cool because everybody else is different from you. And if everybody was just kind of playing a single chord every time they took their turn to try to do thunder damage to somebody, then that's not it kind of bogs everything down.
Right. I kind of keep going back and forth between the idea of how amazing it would be to run something like this for really musically talented people, and almost just like getting instruments there at the table and mixing in a sort of jam session type of experience. And then
Oh man.
also,
Yeah, I think that that would just be like so like I think like I want to do that in such a selfish way because like I'm not musically inclined
yeah, no, neither
in
am
many
I.
ways, and just surrounding myself with really talented people and running a campaign for them where they're all bars and I just get to listen to them jam out would just be like all of it would just be for me. I would just absorb it.
Well, you record it and ostensibly make it for an audience.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, but like
that would be amazing.
the other hand, I love the idea of a like not having really any sort of musical talents myself or knowledge, running it with a bunch of people who are similarly musically lacking, and just kind of
True.
have like, all right, I play my guitar. It's a really intense like doo type of thing, and it invigorates everybody with really go get 'em vigor energy.
That is the other thing. Do you think which kind of player do you think would be more fun to play with? Because on the one hand, I really like the idea of this being not having not put in the practice to learn any kind of instrument, like being able to sort of fulfill that fantasy
Yeah,
through fantasy playing. It's like if you get someone who's really good at guitar and he's gonna play like with a lute, his character's gonna have a lute. It's like, what kind of fantasy is he living out? It's like you're already there, dude.
yeah. Well, like, and that's the thing where like I think either could be cool, but for very different reasons. Where
Yeah.
the uninstrumentally inclined are going to be like you have that fantasy wish fulfillment of not really understanding exactly maybe how everything works, but just having a lot of wacky fun with it. Whereas if you get a lot of people who are, and like, I don't want to say that people who are good at instruments are unable to be imaginative about how music works. It could be entirely the opposite, and they are more imaginative. But like having that experience where everybody is jamming together and literally creating music in the moment. And maybe a percussionist just kind of has a single drum that they kind of beat on in the background, because I always play music in the background of sessions that I run, with the exception, unfortunately, being the game that I'm running for you guys, because we're recording that one and I can't find that much public domain music.
Well, and I know that's definitely the thing. It's like when you record an adventure, you do lose a little bit in that you can't play music, you can't have crunchy snacks. And those are two very big staples, I think, of role-playing experiences, is like you can kind of sit down for 3 hours and do something like this as long as you have enough drinks and snacks to like get by. But when you record it, it's like, ah, darn, we lost that element of it. But yeah, like, man, having a big group of people to be able to like talk to, or like who bring their instruments and just jam out and roleplay, that would be so good. But just like having no instruments and having even people who do know some about music and having them cross-sectioned with people who know very little. But like I have friends who can read sheet music, and I look at it and I see gibberish, and it's like I wouldn't necessarily wrap sheet music into my game, but I would definitely let them like make their own and do, and I would try to very much incorporate that sort of stuff if that's what they want. I think you'd have to ask your players a couple questions before you even started building the world, and one of the main ones would be like, are you guys a group that is established, or are you guys all very, very different who have found one another? Because I would need to know that answer before I would start making the game.
Right, and that's the kind of, how do you put it together? Because are you musicians that were just drawn together and naturally coalesce, or is it something like the GM has this NPC is like, I have assembled you here, the greatest musicians in each of your fields, to make the greatest super band.
Man,
and like maybe one of the players left a band that they were already a part of, and so like those NPCs kind of become almost like stilted rivals.
Sure. One of the other things you could do to really bring some conflict into it is like this is a world where not too long ago, this type of magic was outlawed, and tapping into that power is now illegal.
Okay, so it's a little bit
these guys are from different walks of life, and they're all basically rebels. Like they're against everything, and they're playing music where they can, and they're trying to bring it back in a world that's sort of turned against them because some king or some organization decided that it was it was dangerous, or jealousy, who knows, but like they can only essentially they end up being like the ones who turn the tide. But yeah, basically the plot of Footloose. Uh, but with the ability to be like, they very, very secretly, they can only play their music like when they know it's very safe, and if they do play it at the wrong time, or they try to do the wrong thing with the wrong people, then they're in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Or it's something where like that you're gonna get in trouble anyway, but using the music to help the situation is going to be more important. So in that case, you have a town that's like, well, you broke the law, but you also saved us all by filling this cracking fault line with magic bridges during the earthquake. That saved us all. So I guess we have to rethink some of our stuff. Don't get complacent with it, but I guess thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But you also broke the law, so
yeah. Well, like I think it's like from the more like personal communities, it's like everyone's kind of aware that it's illegal, but it's only like the official police and stuff like that who actually want to enforce it. Everybody else is kind of upset that the rule is there, but nobody's willing to say anything because it's a very like strict community.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
I don't know why.
But yeah, either way, I think there's just so many different ways you can go with it. And I think if you had, probably end up saying this a lot, but with the right group, it would just be a phenomenal experience, I imagine.
Yeah, I feel like that's alternate title for the podcast. With the right group, this could really work. ... So I have a quick final question for you. Something that I've been related to our previous conversation about running within settings. If you were to run a that Horde of the Dragon person. That was what?
Horde of Queen.
Sure.
Yeah, Horde of the Dragon Queen.
Dragon Queen? Dark?
Her name's Tiamat, but that's...
Oh, okay.
You learn that. That's a secret.
Oh, spoilers. Whoa.
Well, it turns out to be like that one... Actually, no, I think it's a different dragon. The Tiamat is the 5-headed one from that poster when 5th edition was like really popular. Anyway, if I was going to run Horde of the Dragon Queen...
Yeah, and there was an event that happened, and the book says if your players don't do this event, they're not in town to see the village get attacked or whatever, they're somewhere else, just go ahead and skip it. Would you still have that village get attacked?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
I mean, I didn't tell you this before, but it does say that like the village still does get attacked is the next line.
Oh, okay.
And you get there in the morning and you deal with the you observe the aftermath, and no, like a lot of people are extra people are dead. Nobody gets any money. But like, yeah, everything. I think one of the things that I think a good DM should do is sort of think about what is happening in parallel, in like kind of direct parallel to what's going on with the players, because that's going to give you those sort of telltale decisions. It's like if they do this, if you present them with a decision and they choose A or B, well, what is the consequence of not only what is the consequence of their choice, but what is the consequence of the choice they did not make?
Right. Okay. Cool.
And
yeah. I'm with you.
So I'm thinking about these players on my cruise ship, and amongst the cruise ship are a lot of cultists, and I think eventually there's going to be a uprising or some sort of coup on the boat where they have to make choices, and I'm sort of slowly introducing this cast of officers and lieutenants and passengers and people on the boat. And eventually, like, some of them are going to turn out to be cultists, and they're going to have to make decisions based on, like, who they think is, going to stay alive and, like, where they want to go. But it's like, if they do this, then this, and if they do the other thing, then, well, I think inaction is still inaction.
Right. It's like the jazz saying. It's about the magic you don't cast. It's about the dice you don't roll. Yeah.
And I think having, knowing so far into the future, like, well, where is this all leading to is going to help. Like, I'm giving them a choice where they're going ashore to find, some cultists are going to go try to find an otter. And if the I'm going to give them another choice as a different thing they could do. They could either accompany this group on this outing where they go into this reef that's this very magical reef to find this creature, or they can do this other tempting thing. And if they choose not to go after the otter, then the otter gets captured. But if they choose to go, explore the reef, then they have a chance of saving the otter. But that's going to have consequences either way.
Definitely, yeah. Well, cool. I look forward to hearing continued updates for that campaign. Of course, I don't think you want to spoil everything for your players in case they listen to it. If you're a player in Carter's campaign, probably don't listen to this podcast. At least not now.
No, I'll start another campaign where I don't spoil things on the podcast. I mean, if I start Horde of the Dragon Queen with anybody, all you got to do is read the book.
Fair, yeah, true. And that's an interesting aspect about it, like making sure that you pick something that the players aren't going to try to game you by reading ahead. Which
no, that is the thing. It's like, well, and like when I kind of really want to read every publication that D&D puts out just to see how, like, where their imagination is taking their creators.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that by doing that, I'm basically saying I'm never going to get to be a player in an official D&D game. Like, I'm reading it all. Right,
yeah, and that's a decision where do you commit to the GM lifestyle?
Right, well, then I was like, what are the odds that anyone's going to invite me to play in their campaign anyway? When they're following exactly the book that I've already read.
Yeah, do you, is that Sad Hulk music playing in the background? I think I can hear some Sad Hulk music playing in the background.
Yeah, right on. Well, we almost made it to an hour.
Yeah. We have a Gmail.
Oh yeah, that's right. We do. settingadventure@gmail.com is our email address. If you know of a bardic world rule book of any sort, let us know about it, because I'm very curious.
Yeah, if you end up playing any of these ideas or come up with ideas of your own, shoot us an email and
steal from the best.
Yeah.
Which is us.
Or if you give us ideas, we will steal them because you guys are the best.
There you go. That's heartwarming. Well, I've been Carter.
I am still Taylor.
This is Setting Up for Adventure. Setting Out for Adventure?
Is it setting out? I thought it was setting up because we're
happy. Oh, setting up? Setting up.
Yeah.
Thanks for setting up with us.
Yeah. Happy adventuring, friends.
I'll mail that down later.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. All right, see you, Carter.
See ya.